I woke up at noon on a Thursday, extremely tired despite having slept at least 14 hours. I tried to get up and do some things, but I was so exhausted I just couldn't stay awake. I recall going back to bed at about 2 p.m. and setting my alarm for 3 p.m., thinking I would just sleep an hour and then I would feel better. I was bleeding so much, but I didn't realize that this was menopause and that it's normal for a woman to bleed for a week to 10 days, but I had been bleeding more and more for about 3 months. In retrospect, it was really stupid of me not to realize that a human being can't live on 2 to 3 pints of blood. I kept thinking that bleeding was normal even though I was bleeding about 10 times more than normal. It was almost like hemorrhaging. Anyway, the moment my head hit the pillow and I shut my eyes, I was suddenly in this black void and a light came zooming at me extremely fast. It was kind of like seeing a star shining bright, and within less than a second it was enormous and right in front of me. It was sparkling and happy like those sparklers kids have on the 4th of July, extremely energetic and bright. It didn't speak to me, but it transmitted a "want to come with me" message. I am very adventurous, so I said, yes, and together we traveled at the speed of light into a galaxy of bright lights. I knew that all of them were souls or spirits, and that each one was a point of light that was another being. I stayed there a while until I understood how there were so many galaxies and stars, and that they all were alive like entities and that I was probably another point of light. I had no awareness of having a body. I just felt like I could move anywhere I wanted, as if I were a light particle or something. I then went to various places. One of the first ones was to a landscape like Mongolia, which was spectacularly beautiful. The clouds were extremely bright, moving the way they do in time-lapse photography, and the light kept changing the way the mountains and the tall grass in the valley looked. I lingered there a while and knew that there really were such things as sacred places. I started to understand that everything that ever was and everything that ever will be were all here at once, and that all the knowledge in the universe was right there for us to access if we just believed and reached for it. I knew that Einstein and Muhammad and Handel and Mozart and all the great artists and scientists had tapped into this knowledge either in their sleep or as a conduit from God or the Great Spirit or the universal energy. I was bathed in bliss and harmony. I felt more love than I could even imagine, and everything emanated positive energy and affection. Every single positive word in the dictionary could not capture the feeling of eternal bliss that I felt. I then thought about music and I was instantly in an enormous concert hall. I was like an air particle in this beautiful theater, and my dead Uncle Sidney was playing the piano with Arthur Rubinstein and Leonard Bernstein. He looked up at me, smiled and winked. He looked so happy and content, and I was really happy to see him playing, because that is what he always loved to do the most. He looked so vibrant, not like he did when he died. I then thought about otters and suddenly I was swimming with otters, but I wasn't wet or cold. I remember thinking I should be cold and wet, but I wasn't. The otters were very playful with me and kind of helped me swim with them. They kept looking back at me to see if I was keeping up with them. They were so lithe and beautiful and so joyous in their element. They came up into an old beaver den and we all laid in there a while. It's interesting because after this NDE I found out that otters use old beaver dens. I hadn't known that before. I never felt that my body was with me, I felt more like I was just a little bright light like a tiny star, but we all communicated telepathically. All of a sudden I was transported to the Columbia River Gorge. I was at a nice party and I had some juice that I spilled, but nothing got wet and there was no mess. I remember thinking that I don't need anything here, there is nothing cold/wet/bad/uncomfortable, everything was eternal bliss. I met many people and we just stood and chatted, but it didn't seem like pointless banter, it was more like a joyous celebration that everyone was just happy to be there. The gorge was green and lush. I went back out into the galaxies and knew that I only had to think about anything and I would be there. I felt a sense of profound comfort and a sense of peace and belonging, none of which I have ever felt. I knew that I was on the other side and I didn't ever want to go back. I was dead, or whatever it was, for 4 hours. My friend called my phone and it rang very loud next to me. I came back and I was very angry that I was back and wished that this call had not come through and broken up my experience. The next day I was admitted into ER for 3 to 4 days and had a lot of tests and medications and etc. I kept thinking about what happened, but didn't want to tell people because when I did they thought I was crazy. As soon as I left the hospital, I went to a bookstore and got books on NDE and out-of-body experiences. What they described was so similar to what happened to me. I now have no fear of death. In fact, I can hardly wait. Before this happened to me, I thought that death was really the end and that there was no afterlife/anything. Now I know that there is, and it really doesn't matter to me if other people don't believe me because I know that I was on the other side and what I experienced was not a dream. I do want my sister to know that she won't die because she is afraid of it, but she doesn't believe me still. I think cats and many other animals see the entities on the other side and most people just can't. I am so happy that I will see all my beloved human and animal friends again. I have had a hard time adjusting to being back here with war and death and suffering. Even though this isn't the real world, it's what I have to contend with now, and since I cannot commit suicide I'm stuck here until I die and go home. I don't know when I will ever be happy back here as I felt so happy on the other side that nothing here can compare to that. I also heard the piano music that my uncle was playing on the other side. I had never heard it before, but when I listened to a classical music station about a year later, it came on all of the sudden. I recognized it from my NDE, it was something by Beethoven. I have been trying to find it again ever since, but it must not be one of his more common pieces of music because I have never heard it again and don't know how to find it, except that it had a very memorable piano section that was lively and high-spirited.